Well, goodness gracious, look at how many people we have back. It's like, you know, I'm pleasantly surprised of comparatively full room for the end of the day. Thank you for being here. This is still Track A, KM Practices and Strategies. My name is still Juanita Richardson. I am your moderator today, and we'll be back here in Track A tomorrow, so come on by then too. This is our last session for this day, Digital Transformation of KM. We have 3 speakers. Our first speaker will be Datin Habsa Nordin from PETRONAS. She'll be speaking for the first 20 minutes, and then we have Linda Lavelle and Barb Bosha, who will be speaking for the last 20 minutes, with 5 minutes at the end for questions. So, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to the ladies, but please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Thank you.
Okay, very good evening, everyone. I'll be sharing with you about the digital transformation in my company. By the way, in my current portfolio, I look after data and knowledge management together. There is that very seamless intimacy between data and knowledge, and I feel that that's where the synchronization and seamless integrations make it a very magical transformations for the company. You can actually connect to me through the LinkedIn. You can actually be able to see exactly my various portfolios. But I have been here since 2019, and one of the mission critical that we got to do for PETRONAS is be able to drive data liberalization, and what's more important, that allows for a data-driven organization. A little bit about the company. We are actually a national oil company that's based in Kuala Lumpur. If you see on the left side, do you notice that building? Yes, that's where my office is. So I'm there at the Twin Towers, still the what do you call it, the tallest Twin Towers in the world. So PETRONAS, we are actually global companies. We have presence in more than 100 countries. We have more than 250 group of companies around the world. We were ranked 139 place on the recent 2023 Fortune 500 global list, and our revenue in last year was close to 85 billion, and we have a total of close to more than 47 employees around the world. So a little bit about the evolutions of knowledge management in PETRONAS. We started at the early part of 2000. That was the time when knowledge management was a buzz, and we say that we don't want to miss that opportunity, because it's indeed something that is of need for the company in order to make sure there is that consistency in terms of practices and be able to drive value from knowledge. But over the time when we started, we was focusing more about brilliant at basics. We want to make sure that whatever the practices of knowledge management, it is coherent in terms of its practices. But the way we did it in the past was pretty much very fragmented. And only then we realized in 2016, we wanted to evolve knowledge management as how we want to bring it as a business solution. So the decision back then was to be able to bring that as a knowledge management center of excellence. This is the place where we decide in terms of the strategy, the right technology, the processes, as well as how do we make sure that we be able to see the value from the work undertaken in the knowledge management space. In 2020, we see a different horizon. The horizon is how do we make sure that digital become disruptor and for knowledge become a differentiator. We want to make sure that the elevating of knowledge to value is very become prominent and visible to the business. And one of the things that we have done is combining what we call as convergence of data and knowledge together. So if you see on your rightmost side, you see those 2 platforms that we built. One we call is Enterprise Data Hub. This is actually a data platform that we built on the dual cloud environment. It's intended for data liberalization across PETRONAS, and it functions as an analytics platform. The EKIH was done a little bit later. It's intended where we'll be able to contextualize in terms of the contents across the organization. So combining these two, we see the powerful of what we have created, which I'm going to share with you a sneak peek about what we have done. But if you want to know more, join us for tomorrow's session I think after lunch tomorrow. Okay, one of the things that we want to bring about is how do we actually explore the AI, become as one of our prominent enabling elements in order to make sure that we derive the best results and the best outcome from knowledge. So we wanted to see from how we make digital transformation and the use of digital, and now we become digital. And this is where we want to disrupt the whole management, where we want to reshape the way we work with digital and AI. It started with 3 different main components. The first one is the tone from the top. It requires the alignment and the conviction from our leaders. The second piece is how do we bring the right technology advancement to strengthen the practices? We want to make sure that we liberalize data and knowledge to its full advantage. And we invested, and we see that our good bet is also on the knowledge graph. Because with the amount of data that we have across the organizations, we need to find meaning to those data. So we bring knowledge graph so that we'll be able to have it more accessible, organized, and insightful. And we bring along the AI-driven intelligent search. This will improve our knowledge discovery, as well as the ability to contextualize the relevant search results. And we want to make sure that what we have done from a knowledge management practices, the codifications of knowledge is no longer rigid. So we bring in the element, how we want to humanize the whole codification approach, so bring about the social knowledge management. And what's fundamental to this is the ability for us to bring the right capabilities for the organization and for the team to make sure that it is scalable. We invested quite a lot of, I would say, resources and amount of time to upskill our practitioners. 2023 is the year this year that we have actually strengthened and be able to develop our ontologies, our knowledge graph specialists, and so forth. It took a toll on us to make sure that the KM practitioner, not just they have been doing the traditional KM, but also how we have evolved them to become prompt engineer. And what's more important when we develop all these knowledge management solutions, we need to do it in a more agile manner. This is important because it's all about progress over perfections. And I think this also allows for the adaptations of the solutions in KM to be more personalized and to be more convictions with the users. And that allows for adoption and scaling. We monitor in terms of the adoptions, the impact that it has for the users as well as for the business. This is what we have gained so far. Year on year, our value creations is between 200 to 300 million. So this has been sanctioned numbers across all the businesses. We do have a methodology, how do we derive to this value. Most of these value are either cost avoidance, yield improvement, improvement in terms of, I would say, sales revenue and so forth. I think this is very important because what are the things that we have noticed is a lot of the knowledge management, the good work of the best practices, the replications of those practices are the one that's going to build the engine of a conviction for a good knowledge as a capital. So that allows us to be able to bring more knowledge and contents into what we call a skill. Skill is actually our portal that we codify all the tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge. This is a single source of truth for all the knowledge contents, in addition to all other repositories with many other knowledge assets in PETRONAS. What's more important is that for skill, we have more than 10,000 active users. To date, we have active 78 COPs. We review our COPs in terms of its participation. So we do actually shut down any COP that does not contribute or idle in terms of its presence. So if you notice, we have more than 20,000 COP members. That's almost half of the organizations participating as a COP members. And what's important as well, from the best practices, we'll be able to identify those good processes that then it becomes part of the standards or part of the guidelines or part of the standard operating procedures. So that allows for the organization to see how the codification, replenishment, as well as the change management of knowledge, it becomes good practices that are being emulated across the organizations. Part of the things that we have done, part of the Intelligence Hub features, is whatever the contents that we have in Scale, any of the users will be able to share any contents to their friends or whoever within the organization. We recently, last year, we created what we call knowledge crowdsourcing. This is a concept that we actually adopt from Lego and Cloudera. It allows for many people making sure that sharing of knowledge and codification, it become less difficult as compared to the past processes that we had. It's as simple as when they converse in a social engagement platform. And what's more important, we have actually close to 700 subject matter experts in PETRONAS. This is within reach for any of the members to actually be in contact for any queries that they have. And more important is the knowledge replication. One of the things that we have done in the past, and we continue to do so, is how do we measure the replications? Because without replication, you will not be able to promote the best practices into standards. So we make sure that there are that attention to replication exercise, and that's also one of the areas that we monitor from time to time. So I mentioned earlier about what we have done this year. It is pretty much a mission critical for us. If we want to make sure that the organization is data-driven organization, one of the important things that we need to remove the obstacle is to eliminate the organizational drag. The mission critical is how do we make sure that the knowledge is easily discoverable? And once you have all those knowledge, how do you be able to contextualize the knowledge for your work process? Those were the mission critical, and we built that within a 6 months period. And what's more important is the build of these whole solutions, the construct of it. We do combine generative AI with knowledge graph. We do have any other solutions, but one thing for sure is this particular experiment we had, it becomes a product that is now in use since late July. 3 months past, we have seen a very good results, which I'm going to share with you what are those results. And as far as the EDH and EKIH, these are pretty much the platform that we built behind the scene, but the interfacing by the users is actually from a portal that we call Data Plus. So I think many of you have attended many other sessions, and they do give a name to the chatbot. Our chatbot, we call it J.AI. So this is exactly what, in essence, what we are doing. If you actually recall, or if you have come across, there have been like survey done by McKinsey as well as IDC, where on average, knowledge workers spend around 1.8 hours or to 2.5 hours every single day to find information. And that statistics has never been replaced with new statistics. So I believe the statistic was done in 2021. So you imagine as and when we have a lot more information, if we are not actually address the root cause of removing the blockers, how we can find information easily, I think a lot more people are spending more than just 2.5 hours every single day. What we have done is, at the left side of your screen, is where we want to make sure that we have the ability to connect and crawl. These are connect and crawl to all the contents, trustable contents from the repository that we have gazetted. We have to whitelist all this repository to make sure that the contents that we share does not include confidential or secret content. So these are contents that is permissible to be shared across. The next one is we're also changing the way we look at the governance. When we look at our document management, the principle was always about keeping the manual record, keeping the manual document. But we are now changing it to make sure that it's digital by default. So those are a lot of the key practices right now that we are changing so that from now onwards, we become born digital from the onset when we created any information or data from the organization. And with that in mind, we combine it with the knowledge graph as well as the generative AI to bring that contextualization on its semantic search as well as the ability for the user to have a conversations with AI. And the result is the ability now for the user to find quick information about any content they desire and be able to converse with the AI so that it allows them to further improve and navigate their day-to-day job better. And also with the social knowledge management, we are now also changing the way we do things. We are also exploring on podcasts. The podcast is not just about topics on the business, it also encompasses human-related topics. For instance, like how do you go about with having a special child? So you want to make sure that the experience of the employees is not just about being able to engage in a more serious topic related to work, but be able to have a more wholesome topics. So this allows for knowledge management to become more wholesome for the organization. And our approach for the digital transformation is all about building an ecosystem. And we call this the enabler triad. The first thing, the focus and the time spent to make sure that we have the right talent and skill. And what's more important is the ability for us to bring about the solutions on an agile culture. And this allows us to make sure that from a scalability and as well as adoption, it makes sure that it will be scalable. And we ensure that there would be a business results in terms of what we aim to do and what's going to be the differences or the gaps that we have observed. And I think this allows us to also make perfections in terms of deficiencies that we may have observed along the way. So the results, what we have done for our smart search as well as our conversational AI, in the past, 60% of our engineers would actually spend hours or days to find information. But 3 months pass, the statistic shows that 90% of them will just get the relevant information they desire within seconds or minutes. So from a conversation of productivity, that's a huge, impactful difference between what they had in the past versus now. And what's more important, we have brought in more than 400,000 contents within the environment that we're putting here. And to date, we have 77% the feedback where the users actually found the information and the contents they require. The onset, when we had this launch, we had a 55%. So there has been a quite, I would say, a positive experience from 55 to 77, and what we aim to do is to further improve that to a scale that we feel that will be make sense and more reality checks for the organization. We don't foresee that we're going to reach 100% or even more than 90, right? And what's more important with the social engagement management, we empower the user to actually bring about the topics that they feel is important, and this is where the crowdsourcing comes in, and we have seen quite a tremendous growth of new topics that have been evolved and being discussed. And to us, that's a very positive sign that people are embracing knowledge management as a culture, but it's more important, we now get to know more topics that we can filling up the tank for our knowledge management. And lastly, on the internal talents, these are the numbers of people that we have upskilled. These are the ontologies as well as the knowledge graph specialists. We also train our knowledge management practitioner as part of the prompt engineer because of the solutions that we have built. And what's more important, we continuously to upskill the members of PETRONAS to make sure that they get the best results from the prompt engineering. We do have a prompt engineering framework to make sure that the ability for the users to find the relevant information that they desire. So the key takeaways for our digital transformation in anchors on these 5 areas, you want to make sure that you got a robust foundation. That's very key. And this is where the data and knowledge is the prominent key features of how you want to make sure that you bring the right transformation to harness the knowledge assets of the company. What's more important, adopt a holistic approach, not just about technology, but what's more important is how do you bring about the right processes, people in the whole transformation, and also building the right culture. And that relates to the effective change management. And what's more important also, how do we remain agile and keep improving so that we can actually elevate our performance from time to time and navigate towards the value creation that's very key to us. And that's the reason why we look in terms of the value creations more intimately, as we believe that knowledge to value is as our narrative from time to time. And if you want to know more about what we have built in the 6 months period where we combine our knowledge contents with the generative AI as well as with the KG, do join us for tomorrow's session. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Linda Lavelle, and I'm here with Barb O'Shea to speak to you about the digital transformation of KM at Johnson & Johnson. And I'll be honest, when I initially put in a topic for this presentation, I was naming it, you might already have what you need to have a successful KM program. Not that we didn't have a digital transformation, we did, but it really wasn't what we set out to do, but it definitely worked for us. So if you'd like to know more about us, this is us. It's in our slides, which are up on the website. Just to let you know that right now, I have my own consulting company. I hate to use the R word, but retired from Johnson & Johnson last year. So all of this is from the work that I did internally as a full-time employee. So our challenge was probably similar to a lot of you. We wanted to make sure that J&J supply chain had the best knowledge when and where they needed. And probably, like most of you, we weren't given, a credit card and go out and do. We had some limited resources, both from the budget standpoint and also from personnel. We weren't going to get additional headcount. And at the time, we were a team of 4, and J&J at the time had 55,000 supply chain employees. So we didn't let that hold us back. We put out some lofty goals, primarily being that we wanted to have them access the best knowledge. Not all knowledge, the best knowledge. We also wanted to demonstrate value to our users, the people who were coming to whatever we were going to put together, and also value to the business, because we are in a business. We wanted them to have a personalized experience. I don't know if you've been in some of these workshops and some of these sessions around personalization, but that was really important to us. We wanted people to come to the knowledge thinking someone thought about what they wanted and what they needed. And of course, easy to use. I say of course, but that's not always the case, right? And one of the most frequent questions I get asked is, what is the best KM platform out there? And the answer always is, the one people will use. So sorry to those of you who don't like to skip to the end of the book, but this is how we met the challenge. We put together what we call the Supply Chain Knowledge Network, which was interconnected knowledge centers, which I'll talk about in a minute. And for the rest of the time this afternoon, Barb and I are going to talk a little bit more about how this knowledge network helped us to meet the challenge and accomplish those goals. So we'll start with a little foundation. What is a knowledge network? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a network. It's not a hierarchical a compilation of KCs. It is a network, which allows it to be flexible, scalable, and really a dynamic way of sharing information and knowledge. So each knowledge center is a place, a virtual place, obviously, where experts, information, and data come together around a purpose. We spend a lot of time on what is the purpose of this knowledge center. And it's topic-based. Again, we did not go the organization route, we went topic. So in our world, a knowledge center is a place that people go to do something. It's not a place to find something, it's a place for people to do their work. So with all good things, and because I think most of us were scientists, we put a process together. We wanted to make sure this was sustainable, and that even though each one feels different and looks different, we had a set process. So we put together a 4-step process, the first step being define. And this is where we worked with the topic owners to figure out what is the purpose. What is the purpose of the Knowledge Center? Who's using it? This is maybe where the personalization comes in. Who's using it? Why are they here? Why do you want them here is another piece of that. Not only what are they trying to learn, but what are you, as the topic owner, wanting them to learn? What's in scope and out of scope, because this could be, really big or small. And we put together what we called targeted experiences, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The next step would be to work with them on creating a knowledge map. So this is where we get into, what is the content that you have? How does that, work with these targeted experiences? It helps people get their head around, the content, the data, the information, which we all know we have so much of. And when we finished define, we were in a really good place to move into what we called develop. And this is where we designed the Knowledge Center looking at those targeted experiences. We also put together a repository for that content to live. So it was a single source of truth. We then connected that content to the design, and we created a governance process, which I will get into in more detail in a minute. And then we started talking about business metrics. We not only have the engagement metrics, but business metrics. So at launch, this is when everything's approved. This KC goes on top of the network or goes into the network that I just showed you. Governance is in place. Site engagement metrics are in place. This is not the end of the story. We have a next step, what we call evolve, because this KC is a living, evolving, hopefully very successful site that we want to make sure continues to be valuable. So we're going to use that governance process very heavily in the evolve step, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So at this point, you might be thinking, that's great, but how did you work through those resource issues? So when it came to the budget, we used what we had at our fingertips. J&J is a Microsoft company, which I'm finding out is like most people here, Microsoft-based company. So we had access to SharePoint, and we're already using SharePoint, so people were comfortable with it. Yammer, which I understand is Viva Engage at this point. Microsoft Teams, Stream, Power Apps. We were starting to use Power Apps a lot. And we did have access to Google Analytics, which was very helpful. So the price was right, and it was supported. When it came to headcount, no, we did not get any additional headcount. But we outlined some clear roles and responsibilities for this process. So the KM team, we were the subject matter experts. We were also the project managers on those 4 steps to make sure that every step of the way that the KM standards that we had were met. We contracted out the skill set that we didn't have in-house. So You'll meet Barb in a second, but Barb and her team were the SharePoint designers and builders. And then the owner of the Knowledge Center literally took ownership. I always said, we handed over the keys when this was all approved. They took care of the governance. We helped set it and had started running it, but they took over the governance. And they were the topic subject matter experts, so it made sense. So a little bit about how we use SharePoint. So we had a 3-layer approach. A first layer being that access, visualization. This is what the user would see. Then we had a second layer that we call the connectivity layer. And this dynamically connected all that data and information and expertise that we had housed using SharePoint repository and intelligent search. So the budget that we did have that we didn't share or that we didn't spend maybe on a platform, we did have an intelligent search capability. This all provided a link to this third layer of sources and resources. And these were custom to each KC. They weren't, some of them had the same repositories and training platforms and workspaces, and some of them didn't. But what was kind of magical about this is, the users don't see that. And it's not just a link to those resources. The content from those resources were visualized in that first layer. So the user never had to learn one of these other spaces on how to use them. The content was brought right to them where and when they needed it. So now our goals. Our first goal is around best knowledge. So we accomplished that through that governance process. So I'm going to spend a little time here. So knowledge was actively acquired from everything you see here starting on the left. And it was curated before being introduced to the Knowledge Center. So this ensured that we had the best available knowledge. So we could be having new knowledge coming in from the outside or inside. You were probably, the owners are putting out surveys, getting feedback around how people liked the KC and what they were doing with it. Content owners were updating their content. We were looking at metrics from those Google Analytic dashboards. That's all coming into this curation process. And updates then were coming over here to the interface and the resources based in SharePoint. We also had what we called discussion forums. That's what we called, we used Yammer for it. So we had discussion forums for the communities. So these were topics, and there were communities around each one of these topics. And we had moderation of these communities. So it was important to have your experts be moderators of these communities. This way they can answer questions, they can ask questions, and this is a way also, and you notice I have not mentioned tacit or explicit knowledge once, right? It was knowledge. For us, it was knowledge. So they're in the process. Your experts are in this process. It's very important. So we used Yammer, and that also was a feed into that curation process. That was the owner, the experts, topic experts as well. It was a process that was a continuous process, and it made sure that this was sustainable and valuable. So we also talked about demonstrating value. We would use the term, we were also big on acronyms, KEBV, or Knowledge-Enabled Business Value. So that was a combination of the engagement metrics, or you can call them click metrics, who's using the KC for how long, but also those business metrics. Together, they work hand in hand. One is telling you the health of your knowledge center, how well is it being used, but how is it being used? Are people using it? And the other one's saying, how am I driving the business? And it's probably not a causation, it's more of a correlation, but a correlation, thank you, correlation. But it's important to look at it together because you want to show your leaders that you're moving the needle when it comes to business. I mean, we all love knowledge management. We're not just doing this for the love of knowledge management, right? We're trying to help the business. So the example I have here, if you look to the left, is just a piece of the dashboard. We have access to so much data with Google Analytics, but we had a dashboard for each one. And then actually the business metrics from one of the knowledge centers, there were 3 pieces to it, and you can see that we were saving, the first one, $13.8 million. You know, you could look at both of them together, and this was how we would prove the value of what we were doing to our leaders. So it's important to look at them together and use those measures that matter. So personalization came in with those targeted experiences. If you remember, we dedicated almost a whole step to getting to these targeted experiences with working with the people who own the knowledge centers. We considered this a journey, a personalized journey through the data and information and expertise. We didn't just kind of stuff it all in a website. We thoughtfully went through it to kind of guide them through the content. But we also thought it was really important to visually guide them through the content. So we hired a designer and her builders, and that's Barb Boucher and her company, and I'd like her to take it from here and show you more about that personalized journey and the last goal, which is around ease of use and navigation. So,
Great, thanks, Linda.
you're welcome.
Hi, everyone. So you might ask, why do you need a professional designer? You know, I have Eric down the hall there, and he knows Canvas, so we're good. We don't need a professional designer. So I'm going to paint a little scenario here. So imagine you wake up in the morning, you lift up your blind, and you see a junker in front of your house. You're like, oh my God, who put that junker there? We got to get it out of here. You just kind of like close the curtain and hope it goes away. The next day, you wake up and you pull up the curtain, and there is this beautiful Mercedes. It's sparkling. It's got the glimmer, and you go, oh, let me go downstairs and look closer to that. So you kind of sneak downstairs, and you look at it, look in the window, you know, you see the upholstery, you see the dashboard, and you're like, wow, how can I get into that, right? So now you think, okay, so that's the scenario. The truth is that the junker might have the better engine, purrs like a kitten, gets great mileage, and the new car was kind of a display model and doesn't even have an engine inside of it. But the truth is, perception is reality. So the reason that I feel that's important to have a good-looking web knowledge center is that as soon as somebody comes into the site and it looks like somebody put it together in 1996 when it looked like, you know, what that first screen, that green screen, and they can't find anything, it really does not help the situation. So working with Linda through this process, we have kind of went through this whole process of really them educating me about what a knowledge center was. Because as a graphic designer, I built websites and you found out what they wanted to do, but you really didn't, I'm gonna say, you drink the Kool-Aid, right? So if you're hiring a designer, the first thing I wanna say is that you have to explain to them what this site is going to do. So understanding, you know, the targeted audience, that how you want to get people through this process is really important. And so they're not going to understand that because it's not part of their vernacular, right? So having them engage the first experience is really important. So the other thing that a professional designer can look at is they see things different. Like, we work with a lot of engineers, and they kind of just want the words. But you have to look at who your audience is. Is it a leader who just wants a snapshot? Is it somebody that really needs to dig down and find out all the information? And how you layer that information to like appeal to a number of different people is really important. We work hard at working. After we come up with the design, we never show it to the client, hint, hint, don't tell them, until we go through it with the programmer, right? So with SharePoint, there were things we could do and things we couldn't do because it's a corporation. They're not going to give us every bell and whistle in SharePoint. So we needed to know how to do workarounds, because the last thing you ever want to do is show a client a design and then find out you can't implement it. So for me, as a learning, you know, hire somebody or work with somebody that knows how to work with the developer. So that was important. And then understand how people are going to use it. Do you just need a desktop model? Do you need a phone model? Those kind of things, because you have to design according to those different responses. And then by working with the developer and the designer as a team, and we worked as a team, that we always were kind of like looking at things so that how can we do things better, or this was an idea, or that was an idea, and the three of us worked together, the three teams worked together. So that's how we got pretty good at, once we got through the first couple of them, we had a lot of learning that way. So I'm just going to talk about some of these things that what a designer does bring to the table is, you know, they kind of understand how people look at things. And, you know, I always give the example of like Craigslist. Like Craigslist is really ugly, but you can find stuff really fast, right? Amazon is all the pictures and all that stuff. So where do you find that mid-ground to get people the information quickly? And I'll show you some visuals on how we approach that. The architecture, we work together with the, talking about the targeted experiences, so that we built that, that navigation and that architecture to match the targeted experiences. Because it was a big corporation, we had to know the J&J brands and the colors and the theme, because when somebody goes to that site, they kind of want to know that they're in that corporation. The other thing that really helped us, not so much our individual team, was prototyping the first 5 pages of the site. That we brought to the client, whoever it was in supply chain, so they could click on things and say, yes, that's how I expected it to work. Because there's one way that you might go to it, well, I thought that was going to be a drop-down. Well, I thought it was going to be a click-through. So those kind of little things can get you really hung up in knowing, you know, how to do that. So prototyping, working closely with the developers, and then the agile development, like, oh, we thought it would do this, but guess what? This worked a whole lot better. And having that open conversation, you know, was really helpful. So this was one that we did for supply chain procurement. And this was really a business-related topic. So across the top, you could see there was different levels of who you were, depending on, you know, what you had to come from. If you just wanted to understand supply chain, you would click on the first one. If you wanted to learn more about procurement, or if you wanted to become an expert, it just kind of walked you through whatever you needed. Again, this was a different kind of site where across the top were the targeted experiences, and then you could dig down from there, depending on what you wanted to open. This was built in a way that once it was built, we could easily train them to be able to add pages, add their own copy. So this one was very templated driven. So once we handed it off, they can constantly update it themselves. And then this was the be-all, end-all of this was Linda lived to breathe this one. So this one really was so heavy in process and orientation, so that as you clicked on it, it kept scrolling down and going deeper and deeper into the site. It had roles and responsibilities. It had icons. It had where you were in the process. It took you to a number of different sites. This was took probably a really long time to do, but it really has great. It had great feedback. They're using it all the time. They're constantly improving it. Let's see what else I have. I think that's it. I have one more thing, if I can figure out how to turn it on. Anybody have a clue here? There we go. We ended on time. Does anybody have any questions or anything we can answer? Great. Well, have a great evening. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of your night.